Hey everyone, I hope you're having a really good time here at AWE. I'm here to tell you about something really important about the future of the internet, and that is WebXR. As Patrice said, I'm Casper Fabricius, and I'm a co-founder of Cimmerse. Now, I've done full-stack web development for more than 18 years, VR and AR development for 3 years, and I'm from Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm really happy to be talking at AWE for the third time, and I really love how this conference just brings together the entire industry and community all over the world. So thanks for that, AWE. Now, my company, Cimmerse, is a solution provider bringing augmented reality to e-commerce. Our expertise is in instant AR experiences that run directly in the browsers, straight out of the e-commerce website. Okay, so let's start with this. What is WebXR? So it's really a bit of an umbrella term for everything related to running VR and AR experiences in browsers. You can kind of compare it to how HTML5 is also an umbrella term for many different browser technologies. But the core of WebXR is the WebXR device API. This is a JavaScript API for accessing VR and AI devices from browsers. Well, that can be devices such as mobile phones, head-mount displays, whatever we come up with in the future. There's also access to VR and AR controllers, which, interestingly, in browsers is being handled by something called the Gamepad API. We also have something called the WebXR Polyfill. Now, this is an open source JavaScript library that makes it easy to use the WebXR device API and Gamepad API across many different devices, also including those without any built-in VR and AR capabilities, such as, well, all Apple devices currently, or most desktop and laptop computers. Okay, so why do AR and VR need to be web-based, you may ask? Now, many of you probably saw the presentation from Digi Capital last year when Tim told us all that, well, the average user installs 0 apps per month. So we just have to face it. There's a lot of consumer use cases out there where native apps just aren't the right solution. I mean, it takes trust and great interest in a brand to go through the hassle of installing their app. And that is the reality of things. We can take online shopping. I think that's a good example. So if you're buying something online, I don't think you want to have to install an app just to see the product, right? But you probably do want to put the product in the room with you, or even on yourself. So having an instantly available AI experience could end up deciding if you buy or not. Now, a little side note here. Some of the more technically inclined may know that there is something called Instant Apps for Android, a little app that you can run straight from the browser. And that did recently get support for AR Core. So that is an interesting middle ground for an instant AR experience, and I'm going to talk about a few more of those. But it's not WebXR. And apps still have the fundamental problem of Google and Apple being in control of what we can put out there and when. I mean, for Apple in particular, in my own experience, initial app reviews can take weeks to complete. And sometimes it can feel like your app gets rejected simply because the reviewer is having a bad day. Not fun when you're trying to do a business, right? Now, I will say, with iOS 12, Apple introduced a new feature called AR Quicklook. That's an instant AR experience right from the browser. And I'll get back to that in a second, because I actually think it's quite interesting. But again, I want to clarify that AR Quicklook is not WebXR. So let's take a quick look at how WebXR evolved into what it is today. Now we have to go back to 2014, and we're back in Oculus Rift DK1 time here, where Mozilla started the development of the WebVR API. The next year, they had the first Firefox build out, nightly built with WebVR support. Later that year, they also released a super cool WebVR library called A-Frame, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that. Now then in 2016, Mozilla and Google together announced the first WebVR proposal. And shortly thereafter, Google released their first special Chrome build, also with WebVR support. Facebook then went on to release another WebVR library called ReactVR. Last year, 2017, Firefox became the first browser to have WebVR support in the fully released standard browser version. And right after, Edge also added WebVR support in their release browser. Now, at this time, AR Core and AR Kit had just came out fully, and so a lot of people had started playing around with web-based AR. So that led Mozilla to propose the WebXR standard. And to help kind of facilitate experimentation with that, Mozilla also later that year released an experimental browser called the WebXR Viewer, specifically to experiment with WebXR on iOS. So that leads us up to where we are today. And when we talk WebXR, we still really have to distinguish between VR and AR, because they are in quite different places. And then when we look at virtual reality, we have to distinguish between immersive browsers and standard browsers. Now, I'm not going to walk through everything on this slide, but do want to mention that Firefox just released a really cool browser called Firefox Reality that runs across a number of different devices and platforms. It's really cool. You should check it out. But I think where it's also really interesting for you guys is, of course, the standard browsers, the ones that we're all using on our phones and computers. What are the support there? And as I said, there's WebVR support in Firefox. There's WebVR support in Edge, however, only for Windows mixed reality headsets. And there is WebXR support in Google Canary, which is being released hopefully in the full Chrome browser sometime next year. So that's on the Windows side. On Android, we kind of have this, what you could call native cardboard mode, where you get hardware-accelerated cardboard, which is available in Chrome and Samsung Internet. Whereas on the Apple devices, we still have to do with this Polyfill support for getting even a cardboard experience. Now, things are a little bit simpler when we look at AR support in the browsers, since it's still, let's face it, early days for that. Now, I mentioned that Mozilla has released their experimental browser for iOS, which supports WebXR, and that Google has recently added WebXR support in their preview version of Chrome. Now, on Windows, Firefox actually supports the Meta 2, and Edge supports the HoloLens. But just to make things really confusing for you guys, that is the WebVR API, not the WebXR API that you then use for AR. So things are moving forward to consolidate things into WebXR, but right now, it's a little bit of a mess all around. Okay, so that's an overview. I want to show you guys a few examples to make it more real. What does this actually look like? And I want to start out with an example of web-based VR. So this is a YouTuber who gives a really good demonstration of Firefox Reality on the Oculus Go. So let's watch that.
So what is WebVR and why is it special? Why am I harping on about it here? Well, one of the things is here, like I said before, you get games. So if we click this soundboxing, it loads up a website, so webvr.soundboxing.co. So this is an actual website. So I'm going to play one of these. So here we go, like most VR games or VR websites, if you click the little sort of glasses button in the bottom right corner, turns you into VR mode, so web VR mode. So a lot of these sites work normally, a bit like watching a 360 video on YouTube. You can watch it just normally on your phone, If you hit the VR button, the goggles button, the cardboard button, it'll take you to this sort of view. But you can play this game that's not available on the Oculus Go store. And that goes for a lot of other things as well. So you can sort of see we are in a full 360 VR environment from a website. How cool is that?
Well, I think it's pretty cool. Now, since web-based AR is not released in any browsers yet, it's a little bit hard to find good examples of that out there in the open. So I'm going to toot my own horn here and show you a Cimmerse solution running in Mozilla's WebXR viewer. This is one of our customers. They're called Muse, and they sell poster art online. They have our solution integrated straight into their e-commerce website, where they have it in 3D, or with the click of a button, the customers can switch over to AR and see how this framed poster art fit into the room. And this is where it gets interesting, because this is where they can try it out in different sizes, try different frames, and really find out what is a good fit for their room where they're buying this for. Another example, it could be a chair, it could really be anything, to see how it fits in, size-wise, what color do I want, and so on. So that's one example of what you can do with web-based AR for an e-commerce use case. Now, I want to dive a little bit deeper and also tell you guys about the WebXR specification and how that's coming about. Now, the way new capabilities get added to browsers is usually by the browser vendors working together to write a specification for that particular capability. Now, this work is organized by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C for short. The specification of the WebXR device API is incomplete, and it's being actively worked on by the W3C Immersive Web Working Group. Now, this group includes key players from Google, Mozilla, Microsoft, Amazon, Samsung, Magic Leap, Intel, Facebook, and even Apple are known to participate once in a while. And so this work takes place right out of the open, primarily through a few GitHub repositories where you can raise issues and put in pull requests for changes. So it's a very open process. The working group has a bi-weekly meeting where they make decisions, and they also post detailed notes to the group's public mailing list. And I want to give you an example of what this working group needs to address, because I feel like, why can't we just get this out here? And there's been a lot of talk about privacy at the talks I've been to here, and that's also a hot topic in the WebXR specification, specifically when you talk about something like hit testing and privacy. Now, as I'm sure many of you know, hit testing is a term used at least within mobile AR to kind of describe mapping from a 2D point on the screen and then down to a physical plane in the real world. And it was pointed out that a malicious developer could potentially trace the entire room and generate a mesh of the user's environment without the user's knowledge and consent. And the group has been discussing back and forth, kind of, do we want to have a light mode, or do we want to do rate limiting? How do we ask for permissions? How does it work together with other permissions? They haven't solved this yet, because it comes down to how do we standardize this across browsers while still making it an open process. So it's stuff like this that they need to solve before it can go out there, because security is such a big concern in browsers. Now, I promised I would get back to Apple's newly added AR Quicklook feature. And I also want to mention a few other instant AR solutions that can be triggered from the browser. Now, the AR Quicklook feature allows websites to let users place a 3D model and AR directly in Safari on iPhones and iPads. You saw an example earlier with our customer Muse that we're using Mozilla's WebXR viewer. So let's rewind a bit and see what happens there before you get into AR to contrast that with AR Quicklook. So in the Muse implementation, users must have this WebXR viewer installed. So they install the browser via the App Store, and then they manually have to go back to the website and enter AR again. Now, we added AR Quicklook to our own solutions, and the great thing with that, of course, is that there's no app to install. You can just jump straight in, as you can also see here, and start placing it in the room. That will, of course, also be what you can do with WebXR once it's fully released. The problem with AR Quicklook is that what you're seeing here on the screen is also all it can do. And if you wanted to add a capability where you change the material of the sofa, or put in a buy button, or put in a little dancing unicorn and a rainbow in the corner, you can't, because this is what it is, and this is all it can do. So that's a bit of a problem with a feature like AR Quicklook. It's good for now, but it's not the final solution. That's where WebXR comes in. Now, I also mentioned that Magic Leap is part of the working group. And I think it's interesting that the Magic Leap 1 actually includes a browser called Helio that has the ability where you can embed 3D content specifically for Magic Leap users into websites. So from what it can do right now, and you can see it here on screen, I don't think it's totally unfair to really compare it to Apple's AR Quicklook feature. Since again, what it does is it allows you to put a 3D model on a website, put it out, and place it in the room. But that's it. So again, Magic Leap does not support WebXR right now, but they just announced at the Leap conference that they're planning to have that support added by the end of the year. And that's actually pretty soon. I also think it's worth mentioning that there's a company called Eighth Wall that has built a fairly well-functioning AR solution that do run in any browser right now. Now, this is, again, it's not WebXR, it's not as stable as the real WebXR, but it's a good option if you do want to put AR in the hands of real users right now, but without the need to install an app, and you should check it out. So the last thing I want to tell you guys about today is, if you are a developer or a creator, or you have a team, how do you get started with prototyping and creating your own ideas for WebXR? So I want to look both at, again, we split it up in virtual reality and augmented reality because it's two quite different scenarios. Within VR, I think there are two good routes that you can take here. Now, the first one is checking out A-Frame, which I mentioned briefly earlier. It's a JavaScript library from Mozilla that lets you build static web VR experiences using just HTML-like markup code. And you can also easily add interactions using JavaScript. The other route you can take is you could go with Unity, because Unity actually do have the ability to build WebGL, which can run directly in browsers. Now, this has been pretty shitty when it was first released. But the last few years, they've actually improved it quite. I get to badmouth Unity because it's a Danish company. I'm Danish, so you can, but I can't. Anyway, it's a lot better now. And as an example that I want to pull out here is a Danish company called Labster, which are very successful in doing 3D lab simulations. And all their stuff runs in the browser because that's the easiest way to get it out there to the students, so they don't have to start installing stuff on the university computers. Maybe they don't have access to that. It has to run in the browser, and thanks to a plugin for Unity released by Mozilla, they also have WebVR support in that. So that's actually pretty cool. Now, for augmented reality, again, things are a little bit more up in the air right now when it comes to kind of picking a starting point if you want to build your own stuff. But I can only recommend that you target the official WebXR API, which is currently only available in Chrome Canary, but is also coming in the Mozilla WebXR viewer soon. Now, since a lot of experimentation has been going on with WebAR the past few years, there's quite a few outdated examples out there that you may stumble over. So I'd really recommend that if you want to play with this, check out this specific example from Google. The link is here, and it's also on the next slide. That's a really good and up-to-date example for developers to play with. So hopefully you're as excited as us about where all of this is going. The internet is really going from 2D and over to 3D, in a new world of spatial computing, where I really think that having AR instantly available will be a true game changer. And as the internet continues to democratize access to knowledge and digital experiences, we really can't have all the good stuff trapped in the walled gardens of app stores. So I can really only encourage all of you to set your content free with WebXR today. Now, we may have time for a few questions here, but also feel free to reach out to me or my co-founder, Eric Prince. Our contact information is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Casper. And as you already can see, backstage you seem so much shorter. I don't know what it is. Okay, I got shorter now. Okay, going for the first question. Why the tracking isn't as stable as using an app when WebXR follow up or take over?
Well, I think that's actually not my experience. Of course, we can always talk about what device, but I will assume that it's a question about mobile AR on probably on the iPhone or Android.
Mobile device?
Yeah, on a mobile device. And actually, the current implementations there do use ARKit and ARCore directly, just like the apps are doing. So the tracking can be as stable as it can in apps. I think it's more a matter of maybe you've seen an example where it was just something quickly slapped together, or people didn't really know exactly what they were doing, and then you can get these issues with instability. But it can be as stable as it can when you use an app.
All right, going for the next one. It's gonna. I mean, if you really answer that question, I assume that you know so much more what's happening at Apple, because somebody would like to know iOS, Safari not supported yet. Do you know something about their roadmap support plans in terms of WebXR? So tell us.
Yes, as the only person on the planet, I have a special back channel into Apple, so I know all about the plans. No, sorry for the sarcasm. I have to be honest, no one knows. I mean, the guys in the working group don't know anything. The Apple guys sometimes come to the meeting and they're not allowed to say anything, they're only allowed to observe. So, unfortunately, they're
You mean, it's like creepy guys, like all dark, like in a corner sitting and being like,
That's what I imagine, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing I can say is that now that they've put out this AR Quicklook feature, it unfortunately seems to indicate that it's not like coming up right around the corner, because they kind of seem to have a different approach to things. But they are involved in the specification work, and that's something at least.
okay, so let's hope that nobody from Apple heard that right now here in the room. Going for the next one. And again, Google and Apple does the app review making sure, not always successfully, we download safe stuff. Who will do that with WebXR? Yeah.
That is an excellent question. I was just before this talk, I had a long talk with Blair McIntyre from Mozilla, who is deeply involved in that whole question around privacy for the WebXR specification. And you're right. That is really the difference between apps and browser-based stuff also, right? When you do an app, especially on iOS, it's kind of implied that someone has tested it and made sure that it's safe, whereas when it's a website, anyone can put it out, and if you can get you to go to the website, you can start doing stuff. So the answer really is, that is what the standardization work is all about, kind of facilitating that, and then it's up to the individual browser vendors to really commit and make that secure. And they have different approaches to this. I think Firefox will always be more obsessed with security than Chrome maybe, and so on and so forth. So the answer is that is, in the end, the browser vendors.
Okay. Coming to the next one, the next popular one would be, can you please share these amazing slides? We see that you're the experienced speaker, so is there a chance, if they get in touch with you, that you would share those slides?
Sure, absolutely. If you got my contact details, just send me an email or ping me on Twitter, and I'll send you the slides. No worries.
Great. Does it work offline?
Yes, actually, you can have excellent offline support. Of course, you do need to be online the first time you access a WebXR experience, but then you can go on and actually cast the whole thing locally. It's something called progressive web apps on mobile phones, and they do allow for running an entire website in offline mode once you've initially gone to it. So yes, that's very much possible.
So, and that's it for the Q&A. Thank you, Casper, so much. You've been like the last speaker. It was a pleasure. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Casper.
Thanks, guys.